Hey everyone, if you don't know me yet, my name is Alan and I'm on staff here at Springcreek alongside the amazing Julia. And we're excited that you're choosing to worship with us online as a family. And if you're new around here and you want to find out all that this church has to offer you, simply text the word NEW, N-E-W, to 96995. We would really love to get a chance to know you a whole lot better.
So we know that many of you who are watching are looking at taking your next step with your relationship with God or your life here at the church. We have a class called Growth Track just for you. It's an online class on January 31st at 1 o'clock p.m. designed to guide you as you grow here. So it's perfect for you if you're new to Spring Creek or if you've been around for a while and are just wanting a deeper relationship with God. So for more information, find Growth Track on our events section on our website.
Yeah, and we also want all of our families watching online to know about our family services that take place on Sundays from 10:15 to 10:45 here at our Garland campus. It's for you and your kids up through 5th grade, and it looks a lot like our kids programming with high-energy songs, skits, and visits from characters that are led by our Next Gen ministry team. We would love to see you here.
And we want to thank you for the generosity that continues to build God's kingdom and help spread the good news of Jesus Christ. If you want to join with us in that mission of generosity, simply text GIVE to 96995, visit us on our website, or you can mail in your offering to our address. Thank you for joining us. Now let's worship together.
Spring Creek Online, good morning. I'm so glad that you are here to worship with us. Jesus took our sin and he buried it. So this morning we get to celebrate that. We get to worship him for that. So please join us.
Arise, my soul. Remember this. He took my sin and he buried it. No longer lives in me, for I was dead in sin, but I woke up to see the light. I won't boast, but in the cross that saved my soul. All else is lost. The grip of fear has no hold on me. So where, oh death, where is your sting? No longer I who live. Now Jesus lives in me, for I was dead. The light. Oh, let this for your glory. Oh, let this for your glory. Oh, let this for your Jesus lives in me, for I was dead in sin, but I woke up to see the light. Oh, let this for your glory. Oh, let this for your glory.
In John chapter 4, Jesus has a discussion with a woman at the well, and among other things, he addresses a place of worship. And the woman believed that the place to worship, just like the ancient Jews believed, was a temple. But Jesus addresses this when he says, "But the time is coming, indeed, it's here now, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth. The Father is looking for those who will worship him that way. For God is spirit, so those who worship him must worship in spirit and in truth." This morning, we can worship in spirit and in truth, which means our location no longer matters. Wherever we are, we can connect with him and worship him.
Who can tell the sun to rise? Who can show the dawn its place? I could spend 1,000 years and only start to know your ways. Who can measure what you're worth? Who can fathom what you've done? I could write 1,000 songs and never capture heaven's love. And oh, praise the Lord, the Holy One. And oh, praise the King of perfect love. 1,000 times my soul will sing hallelujah, and I will sing 1,000 more. Who can heal the hardest heart? Who can hear the softest prayer? I could run 1,000 miles, still I know you'd find me there. And oh, praise the Lord, the Holy One. And oh, praise the King of perfect love. 1,000 times my soul will sing hallelujah, and I will sing 1,000 more. And I will sing 1,000 more. Who can heal the hardest heart? Who can hear the softest prayer? I could run 1,000 miles, and still I know you'd find me there. And oh, praise the Lord, the Holy One. And oh, praise the King of perfect love.
my house, one of our favorite games to play is flashlight tag. We have a little closet and a hallway that's kind of central to the house where you can shut all the doors and turn off all the lights, and it gets totally dark. And then you count to 3 and everybody hides. It's pitch black, and then you just have to slowly move the flashlight around to catch someone. And if you shine the flashlight on them, you say, "Got you, you're it," and then it's their turn to have the flashlight and wander around. But when we play, we made a rule where you have to sit down if you're the person with the flashlight, and if you're the person that's hiding, you can only crawl around. Because too many times when we play flashlight tag, we're running around in the dark, hitting the wall, hitting the bookshelf. Someone always gets hurt. Yet my children love this game. They love having dance parties in the dark where one person gets the flashlight. They love turning off all the lights, closing all the blinds, and then just walking around with a flashlight. I don't know what it is, but at their age, they're both 5 and under, at their ages, they really enjoy just the power of presenting light in a very pointed direction and being in total control of where that light points. Anytime I think about a flashlight, I think of a story of when I was in my very first car accident. And my very first means that I've been in numerous, and I think that's a longer story for another day and another judge. But my first car accident happened in the middle of the night. I was leaving East Texas, trying to make it back to my parents' house in Plano so that I could get a little sleep and then wake up and go to church with them on Easter morning. And I hadn't been able to go to church with them on Easter morning for a few years, and this was going to be a big surprise and fun for all of them. And I'm driving on Interstate 20, heading west. I'd coming close to Terrell, and at some point, I'm driving about 75 in the left lane. I went over a bump that I thought, oh man, I must have just an old squirrel or something. But quickly after I hit this bump, the steering wheel jerks over to the left because my front left tire had popped completely. And I swerved into the median, which is metal posts connected with wire cables. And I hit one post, hit the next post, hit the post after that, until finally my little Kia Spectra had its bumper wrapped around enough post to where it could stop. And I stopped, and my car is just ruined, torn up. I can't get out on the driver's side. I have to get out on the passenger side. At some point, one of these posts hit my battery, so my car was just not operable at all. My headlights are off, my taillights are off, can't play music on the radio, can't hit the horn. At the same time, I couldn't find my cell phone. It was not plugged into the radio. It was sitting in the cup holder, and so I looked in the cup holder. I looked in the front seat all around, and I couldn't find my cell phone anywhere. And it's 1 a.m. I was kind of stuck. There's not a ton of cars out driving at 1 a.m. in the middle of East Texas on I-20. So I started looking around for either my phone or a flashlight so that I could flag someone down. My mom always taught me to have some flares in my trunk, but I didn't listen to her. I didn't have hazard triangles. I couldn't turn the hazards on my vehicle. So I'm looking for a flashlight. I can't find a flashlight anywhere except for a little rubber duck. I was collecting rubber ducks in college. It was a cheesy thing me and my friends started. And for some reason, I had this little clear rubber duck in my car, and I found it. And when you put your fingers on the bottom part of the rubber duck, it starts to flash. And it creates a red and yellow light, and it just goes back and forth. And I'm desperate. 1 a.m, pitch black. I'm standing next to my car on the left median of the highway, waving this flashing rubber duck in the air, trying to get some help, trying to get some attention. And so finally, a group of guys pulled up in a pickup truck, and they asked what I was doing. They said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I ran in the median. I need some help. I need to find my phone. Can I borrow your phone so that I could call my phone and find it?" And they were engaging in illegal activity in their truck, and they didn't want to give me their phone, so they just left, leaving me again stranded with this little light. And so finally, I waving again at every car that could drive by, and I waved down a tow truck. which was wonderful because I actually needed a tow truck. And he said, "That's a pretty cool little flashlight you have." And I said, "It's actually just a rubber duck." He said, "Well, it's bright, got my attention, so might as well call it a flashlight." So he was able to help me find that my cell phone had flown underneath the back seat. He's helped me load my car up and get it taken to a tow yard where my insurance can process everything there. And he was able to drop me off at my parents' house, which was just wild. All because I had this little tiny 3-inch rubber duck flashlight. And that little light let people know that I was there, that there was a need, there was an opportunity, and the right person showed up at the right time. Do you ever feel stranded in the dark, all alone, and no one can see your need, no one can see your struggle? I think too often we find ourselves there. As we address what it looks like to live a new life in Jesus, this new life where we get to take off our old self and put on our new self, we begin to understand how dark some of the old self can be. We begin to evaluate what it looks like for us to live a new life. And Paul continues to talk to the church in Ephesus about this new life that they have. And Paul starts talking about a light. And that's a big part of the new life, because your old self is living in darkness. Your new self is living in light. To continue this story of a new life, he continues his letter in chapter 5 of Ephesians. Paul says, "Therefore, be imitators of God as beloved children, and walk in love as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God." So Ephesians 4 answers the therefore of Ephesians 5 when we look at the old self versus the new self, but he just finished saying, this is how you're to behave. And the idea that if you're not who you used to be, then you shouldn't do what you used to do was all of that second chunk of Ephesians 4 as we've looked at. And moving forward in Ephesians 5, we have to consider, well, if I don't do what I used to do, how can I continue to be this new person? How does that flesh itself out? In Ephesians 4, he said you should no longer walk this way. In Ephesians 5, he says walk in love. Don't walk the way the Gentiles used to, or do the way you used to, but walk in love. This new idea, this new opportunity for you is not a selfish opportunity. And quick reminder, these people in Ephesus are kind of centered around this temple to Artemis, a fertility goddess. Another viewpoint of it is the Greeks call her Diana, a goddess of fertility. And people would show up at this temple and offer themselves. They'd offer themselves their full bodies, their full opportunity. And so throughout this temple, there are slaves, there are prostitutes, there are eunuchs, there are people who are just there to have some sort of hope. But also, this temple is a safe place for fugitives. And so they're surrounded by people who are on the run and know that if they stay in the temple walls, they cannot be charged, tried, arrested, prosecuted for whatever it is they've done. And that's the people that the church is dealing with. That's the pattern that Paul is helping the church realize that they used to be in. So he's saying, imitate God as beloved children and walk in love, but instead give yourselves up as a fragrant offering. He's speaking directly to their situation, saying you are surrounded by this temple of sensuality, this temple filled with perversions, this temple filled with selfishness, people making offerings of themselves and other burnt offerings and sacrifices to this goddess who is not going to meet their needs. So you, instead, because you aren't that anymore, you can make yourself an offering to God by being fragrant, by being pleasant, something that is pleasing to the Lord. Just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us, we're to love others and love God by making ourselves a fragrant offering. So the way we smell is a reflection of the way we're living, and the way we're living might look different, should look different than the people that we're around. And Paul's calling this church in Ephesus out on this, saying, don't do that anymore. Well, I know you used to. That's where you used to be, who you used to hang around with, but we're going to look a little different. And looking a little different is a reminder of where you used to be. As Paul continues, sexual immorality and all impurity or covetousness must not even be named among you, as is proper among saints. Let there be no filthiness, nor foolish talk, nor crude joking, which are out of place. So this who used to be, don't do these things. And I'm going to name them specifically because as you hear them, you can remember doing them. You can remember the people that you see doing them. And Paul's saying, don't do them. But God speaks through Scripture not just to the church that Paul wrote to, but to us as we become aware of who he is. As we give ourselves up to him and read his word, we realize that applies to me. That old self that they used to be is still my struggle. That old self that Paul is telling this group of people about is actually my current situation, my current temptation. My current deceit is pushing me into believing these things are okay because everyone else is doing them. But Paul calls them apart from that. In verse 4, he says, but instead, let there be thanksgiving. For you may be sure of this, that everyone who is sexually immoral or impure or who is covetous, that is an idolater, has no inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and God. Let no one deceive you with empty words, for because of these things the wrath of God comes upon the sons of disobedience. If you're walking around in the darkness, you're going to get caught doing the dark things that people were doing. Disobedience is the simple word that Paul uses. Of these people who are immoral, impure, living this life for themselves. And he's saying they have no part in the kingdom of God. Their disobedience is the only thing that drives them. And they have no hope for a future. And God's wrath will be upon them. But before Paul says any of this, he says, instead, let there be thanksgiving. It's kind of a random place for that phrase to pop up in my mind. If he's saying, don't do these things, and then he's closing with, don't be associated with these things, right there in the middle. Instead, let there be thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is a callback to our new self. Thanksgiving is someone who is aware of the past and its emptiness, and the present and the future and its fullness that God has for us. And the imagery that Paul gives us is flashing light of seeing how can these people from the past be living in this new life without changing where they're at necessarily. And we should be grateful because we know who we used to be, but now we know who God is and what Jesus has done for us. And it's not some sort of pompous, pious, I'm grateful because I'm not that person anymore. I'm not living like this person. That's what the Pharisees did, and Jesus called them out on it. But instead, Paul is saying we should be grateful because we know what they don't know, but we should probably also feel that. The reality that these people don't know, and I wish they would know, and I have an opportunity to help them know. So he says, therefore, do not become partners with them. These people they're still living in Ephesus. Just because it's a church doesn't mean that they have a new place to shop, a new place to rest their head, a new place where there's new people to hang out with. The church is obviously struggling with a lot of these things still, which is why Paul has to send this reminder in the first place. This is a fundamental, elementary truth that sometimes you turn into who you're hanging out with. If your friends jump off a bridge, are you going to jump off a bridge too? Or if someone sees you and everyone else running to the bridge, they're going to think that you are with them running to jump off that bridge. Paul is saying, do not become partners with them. If we dig deep into the Greek to understand partners like business partners, marriage partners, is this a relationship thing? The Greek is is directly joint partners or symmetrical partners in a venture together. This could be business. This could be marriage. This could just be community. Overall, this works back to be symmetrical. Partners, symmetrikos. If you're symmetrical with someone, then that means that their side is the same as your side. Their actions are the same as your actions. And so, Ephesians, I'm telling you, don't be associated with these things. You're probably still going to be around them, but you don't have to link up with them. So don't be partners with them. We're called to be different. We're called to be more. And just as we look back in Ephesians 4 at a new life, we get to say, I'm not that person anymore. I'm not who I want to be, but by God's grace, I'm not who I used to be. We look forward into Ephesians 5, and why does that matter? Who does that affect? Where does that take place? And Paul says, for at one time you were darkness, but now you are light in the Lord. So walk as children of the light. For the fruit of light is found in all that is good and right and true. And try to discern what is pleasing to the Lord. You were darkness. Not you were walking in darkness, but you were darkness. And this is where I read it. And I think, man, that those people are really getting told by Paul. I'm so glad I'm not a part of that church where he's telling them off. But then I read it and God convicts my heart. Josh, you were darkness. And it's a powerful phrase that Paul's using. Because it's an identity, it's a reputation, and it's a reality. Your identity was a dark identity because there was no light. This reality, your decisions were in darkness because you had no awareness of the light. Your reputation is not one of light. So you were is past tense. My old life was in the darkness. My new life should not be. My old reputation is darkness. If I'm living a new life, then it should be as a child of the light. And he goes on to say, take no part in unfruitful works of darkness, but instead expose them, for it's shameful even to speak of these things that they do in secret. But when anything is exposed by the light, it becomes visible, for anything that becomes visible is light. Light illuminates the darkness. Light makes the darkness push away and centers your focus. Just like in flashlight tag, when my daughter points the flashlight at me, says, got you. She's illuminating where I'm at. Everything about me at that time is now visible. And if we're darkness and all of a sudden we're turned into light through Jesus, then that means that we're changed and the presence around us changes. So we don't do what we used to do because we're not that person anymore. But also, when we do things differently than we used to do, it should affect those around you. That's the gist of what Paul is saying. Those around you are going to see someone who was dark is now light. Someone who was like us is now not like us. So when you do things differently than you used to, it's going to affect those around you. This is a huge opportunity for us because everything that is shown on the light, by the light, becomes visible, and therefore it should change. Isn't that our story? I once was lost, but now I'm found. I was stranded on the side of the highway, but now I'm rescued because I had a light. A little light, a ridiculous child's light, but it was enough light to change the situation around me. Not by my power. But when we have been turned into the light, you are light. You were darkness. You are light. When we are light, even though we go to the same places sometimes, even though we're around the same people, things are different. Things should be different, because otherwise, has anything changed? And this church that he's writing to, they're still there. He didn't go plant a church in Ephesus, and then all of a sudden everyone realized how evil Ephesus was, and they were like, we've got to move somewhere else. We can't be around this. But instead, Paul is reminding them that God has called them. They're in Ephesus, and they're to live differently than the Ephesian people do. They're to operate differently than the people in and around that temple do. And Paul's encouraging them, saying, yeah, you were darkness, but now you're a light because of Christ. And because you're a light, you shine on that darkness, and you bring to light anything that was invisible. Because of the way you're living differently than them, they're going to see a change. And it's going to cause them to ponder, to wonder, why aren't they doing this thing anymore? Why aren't they engaged like we're engaged in this practice anymore? And the good news is it's not our responsibility necessarily, but instead it's a blessing. It's not a burden, a weight we have to bear, but it's an opportunity that God calls us to be a light. Because the people closest to your darkness are the people that are going to notice and need the light more than anyone else. The people who saw who you were are going to recognize who you are more quickly than strangers. Because when you do things differently than you used to, it should affect those around you. And this is through the power of Christ. Paul closes this thought with saying, it says, awake, O sleeper, and arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. And the way the text appears, it looks like Paul's quoting the Old Testament. As we read through our Bibles, we can see little pull-out quotes in the middle of different sections of Jesus quoting the Old Testament, of Peter quoting the Old Testament, of the psalmist quoting the prophets. But this is different than that. This isn't an Old Testament quote. Until Paul wrote it, it wasn't a New Testament quote. But this was a common phrase used amongst early church people. It's kind of a throwback to what Isaiah said to the people that God had him calling out. But it was a common phrase used in the church. Awake, O sleeper, arise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. It's just a common way of saying, stop doing what you used to do. Because when you act like your old self, around your old ways, doing your old things, people are going to think that's what Jesus is about. But when you can be around your old life, your old people, your old ways, yet obey Christ and live differently and look differently, you are shining. Christ will shine on you. You are shining in that moment to reveal something beautiful about the light and something painful about the dark. And that's a change people can't resist. They may try to fight it, and it's not our change to make, but Jesus is showing them their darkness, their impurity, maybe their pain or fruitless efforts. Simply through our obedience, God is making us a light. A believer who has committed deeds of darkness is to wake up and rise from the dead. When he says you were darkness and now you're light, you were dead and now you're alive. You have your old self and now you put on your new self. So Paul is saying, be the light. Walk in love as children of the Lord. As Jesus gives you a new life, it shouldn't look like your old life. And you have people around you who can probably remember your old life even better than you do. And they have their own perception of who you used to be. Man, you were more fun when you drank. You were a better friend when you were my wingman and you helped me pick up chicks. You were cooler when you did this sort of thing with us. You were more relaxed when you were high. Whatever it is, That's their perception, and I would say that is their deceit that Satan uses. That is their deceit that draws us in and lures us in and tempts us. But we're not to take part in unfruitful works of darkness. Instead, we can expose them. And you still have those friends. You still have those relationships. You still have that past, which makes it even harder not to take that drink, not to message that person, not to download that app. You still have those weaknesses because you're going to get tired. You're going to feel lonely. You're going to feel left out. You're going to feel hungry, and you're going to want to respond the way that you've taught yourself to respond. And if you do, you're no different than who you used to be. And therefore, the people you're still around don't see it change. But it's when you step up and lean in and claim your responsibility, your identity, your opportunity of a child of the light, a child of the Lord, and they see that you didn't take that drink, that you're responding to your stress differently, that you aren't quite as indulgent or pursuing temporary satisfactions. When they see that, they wonder what's up. And so I wonder, what would it look like in those dark spots of our lives if we started remembering that we are the light? Not by our ability, but by Christ in us. The strength he gives us in a new life. Wouldn't it look a little brighter if we were hanging out with our drinking buddies and we were not drinking and telling them about the newness we have in life, about the fact that we don't have to get drunk to find joy anymore. We don't have to get high to find rest anymore. We don't have to hook up with strangers to be satisfied anymore. But instead, we have this new life that is fulfilling and calling us into something so much more than something temporary. If we could lean in and remember our calling to be the light, I think the fact that we don't do what we used to do will affect those of us around us. That will affect people that see us. And maybe we don't realize how much people see us. Maybe we don't realize how people are watching. They've heard the story of, oh, Josh is a Christian now. I wonder how he's going to respond in this situation. Or is he going to live the same? Is he going to make those same jokes? Is he going to put those same people down? We want it to look different. I'm excited to see what it looks like when we can be the light, when we can live this out fully. And there's a refreshing feeling, knowing that it's not on me to change people, but I have the opportunity to be a part of that change just by living out an obedient lifestyle, just to be the light. Because if I'm not going to do what I used to do, it's going to affect everyone around me. Because that's what the power of Jesus is. Let's pray. God, I thank you for making me new. I thank you for offering us newness of life. And I ask that you would live that out fully through each of us. Would you convict our hearts? Would you encourage our hearts? Show us where our darkness is that we keep pursuing or being dragged away and giving ourselves over to. Show us where we have an opportunity to shine brighter through simple obedience and trusting you. And would the effect of our obedience bring about change because others see you as you shine your light on their darkness through us. Bring healing to each one of us as we wrestle and struggle, as we get drawn away and enticed. Would you bring us strength and discipline and comfort so that we wouldn't be defined by shame, we wouldn't be defined by our failure, but instead we'd be defined as children of the Lord because of the light that you've given each one of us. God, we thank you so much for the new life you give us in Jesus and through Jesus, and it's in his name we pray. Amen. And we want to be available to you. If you want to have a follow-up conversation, if you need resources, if you need connections, we can do that to help you plug into this new life, to help you live a little bit differently so that it might be effective to those around you. I want to invite you to hang out after this. We're going to have a discussion with different leaders in our church about what God is teaching us through the different texts we're studying. And I also want to invite you to come back for the next 2 weeks. We're doing a 2-week series. And it's a really unique understanding of our relationship with money. And I know it's going to encourage each one of us. So we look forward to seeing you next week. But for now, we hope you have a great week. Hey guys, welcome to our post-service discussion time. And this is a great time for people to sit around and discuss what you're learning about what God is doing in your life through the message, through the scriptures, or just any way that God may be growing you. And so we sit down at the table every week to kind of model what that looks like and how that could take place. But we agree collectively as a staff and as a church that this conversation best happens in a community group. And it's through community that we're able to grow together and have some of these hard conversations and learn from each other so we could be challenged. So today I have Alan joining us today. Alan is one of our pastors on staff, and he works with our student ministry and oftentimes behind the camera to make me look good.
I try my best.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot of editing. I know that. Alan, I'm so glad that you are here. The main point of today's message is that if you're not doing what you used to do, it should affect those around you. And I think that's something you live out well. So I'm pumped to have you here. But we have the same 4 questions every week. First question is, what did you learn in general? Was there just something that popped up in your mind? Second question is, what did you learn or were you reminded of about yourself? And then what did you learn or were reminded of about God? And then finally, what do we need to do with this information? Who do we need to tell, or what is it that we need to tell people? So I'll ask you the first question, and then I'll answer it myself to give you time to ponder those thoughts and think about it.
So you want me to ask you the question, or you're going to ask yourself
I'm going to ask myself the question.
Okay.
Because I have it memorized already. I don't want you to have to memorize something. So, Josh, first question. Something I learned. So, doing this prep work on Ephesians 4, I've done messages before on Ephesians 4, Ephesians 5, and I always stick to Ephesians 4, 1 through 16, and Ephesians 5, 21 through 30. So it's all about unity in marriage. And this middle chunk, Ephesians 4, 17 through 5, 20-ish, 5:14, there's just so much there. And this week in my prep time, I learned just the weight that we don't have to feel, but instead the opportunity that we have when we start living differently than we used to. And that's just something that sat on me kind of heavy as I was prepping, and I would hope came through the message, but at the same time, it hit me. And so if that's what God wanted to do through this message, it hit me. And so I'll keep remembering that opportunity. How about you? What's something that you learned?
I learned to not get in a car with you ever again, because I feel like this is the 20th sermon I've heard about you getting into a car accident.
It's kind of a hobby.
Yeah, it's kind of a hobby. No, I loved what you said, reminding yourself that, you aren't who you used to be, and that changes the world around you. And that's actually one of the that's what a life app is. If y'all have joined us in our Next Gen Family service or anything like that on Sundays at 10:15 a.m. to 10:45 a.m.
Nice plug. Yeah, join us, families.
In between the morning service and the early afternoon service. It's our life app, something that God does within us to change the world around us. And it's that, but put into our adult terms,
Yeah.
God does things within us and makes changes within us so that the old is past and the new has come. The new is here so that we can change the world around us.
Man,
that's what you said.
Yeah, I mean, truth is truth, whether you're a 6-year-old or a 26-year-old or a 27-year-old, whatever it is truth, so it applies across the board.
Love that.
The second question, what is something you're learning about yourself or were reminded about yourself through this text or just through God, what God's doing right now? And I think for me, I was reminded of how many friendships I have from my old self, where I might not be living a new life, where I get around those guys and I make the same jokes. I have symmetry with those guys, so their actions look like my actions, and I'm not representing the light well. We talk about the same things, we goof off the same ways, and they're not believers, and I am. And so it's convicting to think, I really gotta take that opportunity to show them I am different, and different isn't a bad thing. I'm new, and new is exciting. There's a lot of great opportunity there. How about you? What are you learning about yourself?
That was probably one of the biggest slaps in the face whenever I got on staff here. Because I just graduated college and I was in a fraternity in college. Going from that, it was a Christian fraternity, but still a fraternity.
Right.
Going from that into, oh, this is church. This is church politics. This is how you work with the team on staff. And, you are blessed to being able to, make a living out of this.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh man, I got responsibilities now.
Yeah.
And then my third weekend, they throw me into middle school camp. And I'm like, oh goodness, I don't know if I'm cut out for this.
It's like punishment almost.
It's not a punishment.
It's not. It's really fun.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But at the time it was so tough. And then there's some moments now where I still kind of revert back to that, younger guy, young college guy self, but having to reaffirm myself, like how you said, you do. I have to reaffirm myself, like, no, like not just me, but we're all, called to a higher, meaning a higher calling. We're all meant to be set as examples, with the students, with kids, with adults that we're around here at the church or anyone around. We're called to be better, not better than them, but just better than what the status quo of behavior is.
Yes.
And yeah, and just, whenever you see a kid eat a sock for, $5,
Golly.
it's just, it changes everything.
Right. And when we see people living that old self, it should make you grateful.
Yeah.
Man, I'm so glad I don't live that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it should recognize the opportunity of, you know what? You're a 7th grader right now and you're living a life, but there's so much more to life than that, than pursuing money or attention or a reputation of being a sock eater. I mean, there's nothing like being around middle schoolers to help you remember your old self.
Yeah.
For me as a guy, I don't know if girls are the same way, but just being around younger people and thinking, maybe I am mature sometimes.
Yeah.
Or being around younger people and thinking, whoa, you're 16 and you're way more mature than I am. I totally made that joke and you didn't. And I probably shouldn't have. So I get convicted and just aware. And so maybe that's what I'm learning about God, or reminded about God in this, is that God doesn't write us off quickly. Mm-mm. So Paul says in the passage that that God's judgment will come on the unrighteous, so the people who are pursuing these things, the idolaters, the sexually immoral. And I think, wow, but isn't he a God of grace? Isn't he like all powerful? He would really just turn his back on people like that? And it's really not that simple. It's God is redeeming every moment of my life, and he's saving me from my sin in every moment. And this higher calling of being light in darkness is a blessing that he gives to the people he's called. And it's a burden because it's so much easier for me to just be comfortable and live my old life. It's so much easier for me to go to those places and to behave that way, to eat that way, drink that way, interact with people that way. The burden is, it'd be easier to do that, but it's more beneficial for everyone if I choose to live like the light. And God continues to redeem us even when we drift into our old self, even when we drift into sin and those patterns. God is at work in rescuing us from that and calling us to more. Like, you were that, but you're not anymore. You are this.
Yeah.
And so that's a good reminder from God. How about you? What are you learning?
No, just like when you said that, like, the people around us and the people that we're surrounded by aren't always going to be that way. I know it's kind of dipping into the fourth question as well, but at the same time, whenever God makes a change within us and makes a change, the price that Jesus paid for us, and we don't reciprocate, the grace and the mercy to the people around us, Jesus paid the price for nothing. And so sharing that love and sharing that grace and sharing how we are supposed to be around them, that's something that God has really always convicted me of. Why am I not doing more? Why am I still kind of reverting back, eating socks, let's just say, for what it is, eating socks. And why aren't you pursuing more of the light that he has brought? Because if you don't, it means like it's just we're taking it for granted. I feel like we do take it for granted all the time as well.
Yeah.
And so if we're just bringing it around to the people around us that need it, because once they have it, then they hold us accountable. That's something that I've learned in college is that, guys that didn't grow up Christian like I did, guys that, didn't live the Southern Baptist lifestyle, go to church in your nice jeans and polo and tucked in and everything like that.
Good boots.
And the good boot. I never wore boots.
Oh, okay. Different church, I suppose.
Yeah, different church. But they recently became a Christian because their friend invited them to a youth group their senior year. And then they're in college and they're a brand new believer. And so seeing that just kind of reminds me also, like, the reason why we have to be this way for ourselves is for the people around us, so that they can also hold us accountable. We can hold them accountable, and we can just kind of grow further in Christ. The Bible says, as iron sharpens iron, man shall also sharpen man. And it's just our duty to still be in the light, no matter how much we try to fight it.
And I guess as that does drift into the fourth question, what do we tell people about that? More practically, how do we tell them about that? I guess it would be the next step, is knowing what they need to know. How do we help them hear it in a way that they'll hear it? Because I can't just go around to people living in sin and say, wake up, sleeper, like rise out of your death and Christ will shine on you, because they won't hear it that way. There's people living by different morals and different standards, and they're just so comfortable in their complacency and in their pain. And there's got to be a way where we can just say, hey man, there's more. There's so much more than the attention that you want right now in Christ. There's so much more than the money you're pursuing right now because of Christ. We don't have to live up to those standards because we're called to so much more in Jesus. So how does that play out?
I feel like it plays out, we tell them that there is more to life. We also got to show them by how we live out our lives, by the fruit that we bear, by, something that Gary's told me, that we also are planting seeds. We don't always see the fruit, but by those seeds that we plant and by the way that we show, how Christ has changed us and how Christ is continually changing us within the light, people will see it and people will want to be that. People will want to live that out, live out a life that's not controlled by their addictions, live out a life that's not controlled by their shame or sin or whatever it is. They want to live out a life of freedom because Jesus did ultimately pay that price for them to live out their life. Yeah, the biggest thing is telling, but also showing more than telling, because I'm a big, I like to see it, to believe it. And I've seen God work so many different ways and so many different people, and including my life.
Well, and maybe that's what Paul's saying to the Ephesians is you're still in Ephesus. Live like you're the light, and God will work in big ways. Yeah. For a lot of us, we flee where we used to be so that we can be this new person. And if all we're doing is gathering together as Christians and creating this bubble around us, then we aren't really allowing our light to shine in those dark places. Yeah. So we got to show them this new life. We got to show them this light. That's great insight. Well, Alan, thank you for joining us and answering the 4 hard questions of this week. And I'm excited to see how God uses you and uses us as a church as we each shine our lights in our respective places. So thanks for joining. I'm pretty excited. Yeah. And thank you guys for tuning in. As always, we'll have this discussion available. If you want to join in the comments, you can. If you want to join a community group and have this discussion face-to-face or virtually, you can text the letters CG to 96995. That's CG to 96995, and we can get you plugged into a group of people just to experience what this is like. We hope you guys have a wonderful week.